Hey everybody, it's Brett and welcome back to my channel. Talking today about my February wrap up, everything I read, what I thought about it, 10 books to talk about. So let's go. All right, so I had a fairly good month. I actually had a very good month in February. In fact, two of the books that I read definitely are going to be contenders for my end of the year list, but all of these I enjoyed. I'm starting to think I'm either picking really well this year or I'm getting really soft, but I'm enjoying so much of what I'm reading and haven't been that inspired to stop that much of anything. So, with that said, let's get right into it. I want to start with one of those books that I love so much. It comes out next week, which is the 11th. It is the long-awaited follow-up novel from Karen Russell called The Antidote. I was blown away by this. This is set in 1930s in Nebraska in a fictional town called Utz, U-Z. I suppose you could also say Uz, but I'm going to call it Uz. I don't know. Uz. This is Nebraska during the Dust Bowl, and it starts with an incredible dust storm. So the book centers on four characters. Well, there's five with a caveat, but the main four are a young girl who goes to live with her uncle, who is a wheat farmer, after her single mother is murdered. And then there is a young woman who comes to town. She is a photographer who works for the government, who has a camera that sort of has a life of its own. The last character is a woman who is a prairie witch, the Antidote. What the Antidote does is takes memories from your mind that you want to get rid of. Anything you want to forget, you can deposit it into her vault, and she will take that memory away from you, and you will never remember it again. All of these characters will eventually intersect. The fifth character that I said sort of is a scarecrow who is on the property and comes in periodically between chapters to kind of give his own view of what's going on. If this all sounds a little fantastical, it is. Clearly, Karen Russell has played with magical realism before, and she's doing it here as well, but it's not anything that's overwhelming. I think it aids the story. It's not magic per se. It kind of just propels the story forward in certain regards. The book is really dealing with one of its big themes is about memory, both collective memory and individual, and what we might try to do to forget things or how we choose to forget things and the ramifications of what happens because of that. But it's also about colonialism. It's about the Sioux Indians, the indigenous people, losing their lands to the American settlers and the ramifications of that. So she's playing with a lot in this book, with some of the most beautiful prose that I've read in a while. It just absolutely stunning. I liked Swamplandia when I read it, but it was so long ago that I think I would have a completely different take on it now, and certainly much more of an appreciation. This I just thought was top notch. Certainly, it will be one of my favorite books of the year. It's one of the ones to beat. So again, that's out March 11th. And thank you to Knopf for my advanced reader's copy. All right, moving on. The Last Man in Paradise by Syed Masood. I talked about this in my last video because some of these, and a lot of these books I talked about in my last video because they were all March releases, and most of these books are coming out this month. I loved this book. I loved his first book, The Bad Muslims Discount, and if you haven't read that, I would highly recommend it. He just is a really brilliant writer, and the way that he blends humor and tragedy and serious situations. He writes fantastic characters. This is about a sort of rebellious teen whose father sends him away to England to go to a religious academy to become an imam. While he's there, he leaves and instead becomes an actor and never tells his parents. So his parents still believe that he's gone to this religious school. His grandfather is dying, and his father calls to say to him, your grandfather wants you to come and see him before he dies. It's very important that you're here. So he goes to his childhood home in Redding, California, prepared to play off this lie that he is now a religious leader But not only that, he's left behind this woman, this at the time she was a young girl that he fell in love with and was involved with, which was the reason he was sent to the religious academy in the first place. So there's a lot going on here. It is an incredibly fun cast of characters. I guarantee you will be laughing out loud at times. It's really smart, like his previous book. It's just a delightful read. Thank you to Eighth Note Press for this, but check it out. This comes out March 18th. All right, next up is Vantage Point by Sarah Sliger. And thank you to MCD for this. This is I would say gothic thriller, but I caution it because it's more cerebral, because I wanted to try to encapsulate it for you and say, well, it's kind of the fall of the House of Usher meets Succession. And I wouldn't say that's not true. It's much more of a slow burn to me. And the mystery, as the mystery begins to be solved, it's a little more logical. I don't want to give too much away, but it's about two siblings who are the surviving members of an extremely wealthy family, all of who throughout history have met an unlikely demise in the month of April. So, of course, the book is all plotted through the month of April as the surviving older brother is running for a senatorial position, and his younger sister, who is kind of a mess, something happens which could put that in jeopardy. He is married, the older brother, to the younger sister's best friend. The narrative goes between the best friend and the younger sister. The younger sister is a hoot. She's a train wreck, but she's a hoot. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really smart. I didn't read Sarah Sliger's other book, but so this was a first-time author for me. And I really liked it. I didn't really know what to expect. I listened to this also on audio, and the audio was top-notch. But if you want a sort of thriller that doesn't follow by traditional playbooks of like, oh, here's a twist and it's a locked room and here's a twist on a twist. It's not that. But I thought it was really smart and well done. All right, now to my other book that was an absolute fave and could be a fave of the year, which is Sean Hewitt's Open Heaven. This will be coming out in April, and thank you to Knopf for this as well. Sean Hewitt is a poet who wrote a autobiographical novel called All Down Darkness Wide, which I also read this month, which I thought was phenomenal as well. It's kind of a twofold story. His coming of age as a gay man, but also his being involved with a troubled man in a kind of toxic relationship and how he found his way through that. So that's what this book is. And this book was my first introduction to Sean, and just a stunning writer. This new book is a fiction book. And so it is his fiction debut, and it is luminescent. It is about this young man who knows he's gay, who lives in this very small English town, who just almost feels trapped. And his job is to deliver milk with the milkman. He runs the milk up to the house every morning. Anyway, at one of the houses nearby, there is a young man that is suddenly been taken in by these neighbors. He is apparently troubled, and they thought, well, it would do him good to be out in the country for a while. These two become friends. The book really becomes this examination of what it's like to really fall in love for the first time, but fall in love with someone that you know can never possibly return what you're feeling because this object of his affection is straight. It is such an incredible examination of the word longing. I thought it was heartbreaking and beautiful, and it made my cold, dead heart like warm up again and remember what that feeling is like to be so desperately in love with someone and so badly want them to return the gaze and the feelings and all of it. It's stunningly beautiful writing, as you would expect from someone who is a poet. So again, loved this one. Will certainly be a contender for my top 10 of the year. All right, next up, Fagin the Thief. If you are someone who is watching my podcast or listening to my podcast, you will know Allison Epstein was just on last week. I really loved this book, which is a retelling of the Oliver story told from the point of view. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not really a retelling of the Oliver story, Dickens' Oliver, as much as it is taking Fagin out of Oliver and giving him his own story. Eventually, those two tracks meet, those characters all come together, but this is about the history of this man, and it's fascinating. It's also incredible the way that she made Fagin, who is delightfully despicable, but really sympathetic in this book, and really makes you begin to understand what his motivations could be. If you are a fan of Oliver Twist, if you're a fan of the original source material, you should definitely check this out. But even if you're not and don't know it, or if you've seen the musical Oliver, you know it. Fagin is such an iconic character. It's a really, really, really wonderfully done historical novel. All right, also coming out in March, Kristen Arnett's Stop Me If You Heard This One. I know I was talking about this earlier when I was talking about things I wanted to read in March, and I also said to many of you, I said to many of you, some I didn't say it to. I said, Kristen seems like she'd be such a great person to talk to, and I feel like she doesn't know it yet, but we would be friends. And, well, we have since talked. And we're friends. No, but she will be coming on the podcast. Look for that. We had a delightful chat. The book is really fun. It is about a 28-year-old woman, a lesbian, living in Orlando, Florida, who is a party clown, and her life. And she takes this very seriously. She works at a pet store. So it's really a slice of life about her, this woman who is also a performer that she's very obsessed with, the people she works with, the very complicated relationship she has with her mother, who is also a lesbian, and what happens. So it's really entertaining. I will say this, I think it's a novel with comedic moments, but I want to caution people because it's not like a laugh a riot book. And I don't think it intends to be. It's really heartfelt and it's very real. And I think it very much encapsulates what it's like to be in your late 20s and trying to figure it out. Because I think for anybody who's gotten a little bit older, I think most people, myself included, I don't think you really start to figure out anything until you're in your 30s. So it's that weird kind of time period when you're like trying to make money, trying to make a living, trying to be independent, wondering how you're going to pay rent, wondering if this is what you should be doing. That's all what this book is. So thank you to Riverhead Books for this. And this comes out also March 18th, big March month. Then I talked about this in my March releases as well. The Jackal's Mistress by Chris Bajalian. I don't need to know. I think I said a lot of what it was before, but for those of you who didn't see that video, really quickly, it is about a woman. She is a Confederate wife. Her husband is in the army. They have a farm where they produce grain for the army. He has been missing for quite some time. A Union soldier is severely wounded and is brought to her home. She lives with two former slaves that were freed by her husband, who have decided, a husband and wife, who decide to stay on and live there and help on the farm, and her niece. So it's this cast of characters that kind of bring this man back to health and what happens. Like I said before, Chris Bajalian, I came to him late with only having read his last three most recent novels, but I think he's one of those prolific writers who puts something out virtually every year, and his subjects are so wildly different that I have to give him props. And I also have to say, he's also one of the nicest guys and one of the most generous writers to other writers. And as always, if you follow him on like Instagram, always pushing other writers and their books and why you should get it. I just think that's amazing. So, but this is really, really, really a solid read. This would be a fun book club read. This is also a great beach read. So check it out. This is something else that would, frankly, also be a really good limited series. And thank you to Doubleday for the copy of this. All right, so down to my last two. Both of these I did on audio, so I don't have copies of them. The first is The Strange Case of Jane O. by Karen Thompson Walker. This is the first thing I have read by her. I really, really, really liked this. Kind of a strange premise about, it's told in dual narratives between a psychiatrist and his patient, this woman, Jane, who comes to him because she has been having these moments of total blackouts where she cannot remember parts of her life. She just up and disappears from her current life, doesn't know where she goes, doesn't know what happens while she's gone, and then turns up later and everything is seemingly fine. So it's up to this psychiatrist to kind of diagnose and figure out what's happening and is it actually real. I think there was a part of me that when I went into this thought there was going to be a gotcha moment or like a Sixth Sense moment, and it's not that either. It's really smart. It worked really well on audio between the two narrators. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what I would have thought about it necessarily if I would have enjoyed it as much if I just read the book, but as an audio book, I thought it was really great. So I would check it out. And then the last book, which I absolutely loved, is called Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton. I'm seeing this all over the place now, and I know it's been out in the UK for a bit. It just came out here in the States this week. So it is a nonfiction book. Chloe Dalton is a writer and a political advisor. During COVID, she went to stay in a family home that was in the English countryside. And one day she came across a baby hare that was hurt. And she called her sister, who is a vet, who kind of talked her through this, but against her better judgment, she took the hare in. Now, the risk is that the mother would smell Chloe on it and reject the hare, but she started to raise this thing. And it's that story. So it becomes a twofold thing. And I think someone had said at one point, it's a little bit like H is for Hawk, which I did not read. But she gives you a lot of the history of the hare, which I didn't know is separate from rabbits. And so that was all fascinating to me. And they're truly spectacular creatures. And if you do end up reading the book, I would highly suggest that you also follow Chloe Dalton on Instagram, because she has pictures of the home, the hares, all of it. And it really kind of fleshes the book out in a large way. I thought it was so, so beautiful. And it changed her life. And she talks about in terms of our relationship to nature, our relationship to animals. I think it's a really, really, really special book. And I think it moved me in particular because of so much of what's happening right now, especially in the US, but and all over the world. This was like a really nice balm. And I just found it very affirming and beautiful. And it's not a long book. It's not a long audio book. In fact, I listened to the whole thing in one trip driving from Los Angeles out into the desert, which is about 3-hour drive. And I really was just smitten with the whole thing. So check this out. The bonus thing in the audiobook is there's a conversation afterwards with Chloe Dalton, which is about 10 minutes long, and it's really great and really informative. So check it out. So those are my 10 books. Those are the 10 books of February. I'm just pulling everything together for March, which I'm really excited for. I am going between feeling, I don't know about all of you, but totally overwhelmed between the International Booker, which I'm not even going to get into all of that, but so many of the books are short. I'm going to try some of them, as well as trying to finish out the Aspen Words long list. And then now we have the Women's Prize long list as well. It's really hard to keep up. And there's moments when I'm like, how? Maybe you just do the short list. I don't know. If you've got a secret, tell me. I'd love to hear it. All right. So I hope some of these were interesting to you. Let me know if you've read any of them, if you want to read any of them, tell me your thoughts. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know what your standouts were for February. I'd love to know. And I will be back either later this week or next week with my March TBR and probably my impressions of the Women's Prize long list. So thanks for being here, and I will see you all soon.